Imagine being so good at your job that your company's biggest client demands you come with them in a multi-million-dollar deal. You'd think that's a compliment, right? Except the new bosses didn't see me as an asset, they saw me as baggage. They underestimated me, disrespected me, and almost destroyed my life. But what they didn't know was that I had the power to destroy theirs. And when the time came, I pulled the trigger. This is the story of how I, one nobody technician, took down a nationwide company worth millions of dollars. If you've ever worked under a toxic boss, if you've ever been treated like you don't matter, or if you've ever dreamed of getting justice against the people who wronged you, this story is going to hit you hard. So grab a drink, settle in, and if you're new here, make sure to subscribe for more jaw-dropping revenge stories. Because today, I'm about to show you how sweet karma can be when you give it just the right push. Let's rewind the clock to 2007. That's where this all begins. Back then, I was fresh out of school. I studied television production, spent countless nights in studios, behind cameras, directing live shows, handling documentaries. I wasn't just okay at it, I was good. Damn good. The kind of good where people remembered your name. The kind of good that opens doors. But here's the thing about working in TV and production, it's expensive. You don't just show up with talent, you need gear. And gear costs money. Tens of thousands. Cameras, lighting rigs, editing suites. Before I could even dream of running my own business, I had to take out loans, max credit cards, scrape every penny together. So while I was clawing my way out of debt and building my production company, I needed something steady. Something that paid the bills while I built my dream. That's when I landed at Fancy Hotel. Picture the Plaza Hotel in New York, but in the Midwest. The kind of place where politicians, celebrities, billion-dollar corporations, and CEOs host their galas and conferences. And my role? I was the guy behind the curtain, the audio-visual technician. And let me tell you, in that world, the AV tech isn't just plugging in wires. We're the lifeblood of the event. The reason the CEO's speech looks polished, the gala feels magical, and the million-dollar fundraiser doesn't look like a school talent show. If we do our job right, nobody thinks about us. If we mess up, everyone notices. Now, I didn't just do my job. I owned it. I was fast, precise, calm under pressure. Within 6 months, I went from the new guy to the lead technician. 3 people worked under me. I ran ballrooms like clockwork. When there were only 15 minutes to flip a room for the next event, I made it happen. The show always went on. And people noticed. Executives remembered my name. Event planners requested me by name. Even the Secret Service vetted me so I could handle presidential visits. I wasn't just some random tech. I was the guy. The one you trusted when failure wasn't an option. For 5 years, I built my reputation. For 5 years, I made Fancy Hotel look flawless. For 5 years, I gave everything. But in 2012, everything changed. Now, like I said, 2012 was the year everything flipped upside down. For 5 years, I had been Alpha AV's golden boy at Fancy Hotel. The lead tech who never missed a deadline, who made sure the show always went on. Clients trusted me, executives knew me, and honestly, I thought I was untouchable. But here's the ugly truth about this industry: loyalty doesn't matter when money talks. Alpha AV's contract with Fancy Hotel was up for renewal. Normally, that wouldn't have been a problem. We had history, relationships, results. But behind the scenes, another player had been whispering in the ears of the people who mattered most. Enter Beta Avenue. They were younger, cheaper, and desperate to claw their way into the market. For over a year, we'd heard the rumors. Beta AV is underbidding contracts. They're making promises they can't possibly keep. They're cozying up to billion-dollar corporation executives. And then, the hammer dropped. Alpha AV was out. Nationwide. Every single BDC hotel, gone. And in swooped Beta AV, snatching up the contract that had been Alpha AV's bread and butter for years. But here's the kicker. At Fancy Hotel, the flagship hotel of the entire chain, BDC added one little clause to the deal. A stipulation. Me. I wasn't optional. I had to come with the deal. On one grueling 20-hour day in May 2012, I did something that still feels surreal. I clocked out of Alpha AV, then immediately clocked in with Beta Avenue. I packed up all the Alpha gear I had spent years organizing, loaded it out of the hotel, and rolled in Beta AV's cheaper, knockoff equipment. It felt wrong. Like I had just watched a 5-star restaurant get replaced with a gas station deli. At first, I thought, okay, maybe this won't be so bad. They've got me. The clients trust me. The hotel staff trusts me. Maybe I can keep things afloat. But Beta AV didn't see me as an asset. They saw me as baggage. I could feel it in every interaction. I wasn't one of them. I was a remnant of their enemy, Alpha AV, forced onto their payroll. And so, they nitpicked. They second-guessed. Case in point, the storage rooms. For 5 years, I had perfected that setup. Every cable, every rig, every projector had a spot. Efficiency wasn't just nice, it was survival. You don't flip a ballroom in 15 minutes if you don't know exactly where your gear is. But Beta AV, they had to redo it their way. So we spent days reorganizing. Weeks, even. Until, slowly but surely, the inefficiencies smacked them in the face. And you know what happened? They quietly moved the gear back, exactly where I had it in the first place. But did they admit it? Of course not. They just gave me looks, the kind that said, "We don't trust you, but damn it, you were right." Now, remember, the clients were my bread and butter. They knew me. They'd worked with me for years. They trusted me to make their events shine. But Beta AV had different priorities. They didn't care about long-term relationships. They cared about one thing, squeezing every dollar out of every event. I remember one moment crystal clear. A loyal client, someone who had hosted events at Fancy Hotel for over a decade, looked around the ballroom and frowned. The setup was bare. Minimal. Nothing like the lavish productions we used to pull off. They asked me quietly, "Hey, is this it? Last year we had more lighting. Better screens. Are you guys cutting back?" My stomach twisted. Because I knew the truth. They were being overcharged, and underdelivered. I tried to sneak in extra gear. To quietly upgrade the setups when I could. But the new sales guy. He caught me every time. If they didn't pay for it, he sneered, "They don't get it." Period. Never mind that these were VIPs, people who had kept the hotel booked solid for decades. Nope. All that mattered was the invoice. It didn't take long for clients to notice the shift. The whispers started. Loyal customers started asking about alternative AV providers. A few even jumped ship completely. And in our world, that's catastrophic. When someone breaks tradition, when a company that's hosted their annual gala at Fancy Hotel for 20 years suddenly books somewhere else, people notice. And billion-dollar corporation noticed. BDC executives had always trusted me. They'd given me side gigs, had me produce videos, invited me into rooms where sensitive, secretive conversations were happening. I was the guy. But now, I could feel their eyes on me differently. Not angry, disappointed. Like they knew I was still me, but I was chained to something rotten. Just when I thought it couldn't get worse, it did. After about a year, the old director retired and the sales guy moved on. Honestly, I thought maybe this was our chance to reset. But no. They brought in a new director from another hotel. One man to do both jobs, director and sales. And this guy, he made the previous regime look like saints. How do you fix charging too much? He charged even more. How do you handle clients? He talked down to them. I'll never forget one meeting. A seasoned event planner, someone who had been doing this longer than I'd been alive, was calmly explaining what her client needed. And this new director, he literally cut her off mid-sentence and said, "No, no, no. You don't understand how this works." "I do." I saw her face flush with anger. And I knew, right there, we'd just lost another client. I had to step in. "Why don't we step out for a moment?" I said, forcing a smile. I practically dragged him out of the ballroom. And once the doors shut, I let him have it. "Do you have any idea what you're doing? You don't talk to planners like that." You don't argue with clients in front of their bosses. You are destroying us. But he didn't care. His ego was bigger than the entire ballroom. So, you know what I started doing? I treated him like a child. When he went too far, I literally banished him to his office. I'll handle this, I'd say. And I'd shove him out of the room before he could sink the ship any further. But the ship was already sinking. Year by year, the hours dwindled. For an AV tech, no events means no work. And no work means no paycheck. At our lowest point, I was lucky to get 10 hours a week. Do you know what it feels like to be on call 24/7, ready to run to the hotel at a moment's notice, only to sit at home with nothing, week after week? You can't take another job. You can't plan. You just wait. I started drowning financially, the same way my colleagues were. And that's when the thought hit me, maybe it's time to burn this whole thing down. It started small. Conversations in the back rooms, whispered while striking down equipment. Hey, you looking for another job? Yeah. You. Definitely. And slowly, I began to orchestrate something bigger. Not just at Fancy Hotel, but across the region. Every beta AV tech I knew was miserable. Every one of them was looking for an out. So I planted the idea, what if we all left, together? It was risky, dangerous, but poetic. I had friends still at Alpha AV, people who missed me, who had moved up into executive roles. And maybe, just maybe, they could use a little heads up. And, well, maybe some of my buddies at BDC deserved a whisper too. Beta AV thought they had us trapped. But what they didn't know was that the countdown to their destruction had already begun. By mid-2013, we weren't just struggling. We were suffocating. 10 hours a week. Maybe 12 if we were lucky. Imagine that, being skilled, vetted by the Secret Service, trusted with million-dollar events, and sitting at home, staring at your phone, waiting for it to buzz. Waiting for work that never came. I remember one night, staring at a pile of bills I couldn't pay. My car payment overdue. My mortgage slipping. The production company I'd worked so hard to build. On life support. And then the thought hit me, they took everything from me. But what if I take everything from them? That's when the plan started to crystallize. I wasn't the only one hurting. Every single technician in Beta AV's orbit felt the same squeeze. We'd all traded stable work for scraps. And unlike Beta's execs, who were insulated with salaries and bonuses, we lived event to event. Hour to hour. I started talking. Quietly. Casually. Hey, ever think about quitting? At first, people laughed it off. Quit. And do what? But as the weeks passed, those laughs turned into confessions. Yeah, I've been looking. And that's when I realized, we weren't scattered rats on a sinking ship. We were a crew. And if we jumped at the same time, we could sink the captain with us. Here's the thing, sabotage wasn't necessary. Beta AV was already sabotaging itself. Overpriced. Under-delivering. Burning bridges with clients left and right. All I had to do was nudge. I whispered to my old director at Alpha AV, who had since been promoted into an executive role. Hey, maybe keep an eye on Fancy Hotel in the next few months. Something big might be coming. He didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. He trusted me. A little later, I bumped into one of my BDC contacts. Someone I'd worked with countless times. Someone who remembered I was always the guy who got it done. Things at the hotel, they're bad, I told them. Really bad. Just be ready. I didn't outright say it, but the message was clear. The storm was coming. We could have quit any week, but that wouldn't have made the impact. So we waited. And then came the perfect storm, a massive annual event for BDC. Their flagship gathering. The kind of event where failure wasn't just embarrassing, it was catastrophic. This wasn't just some wedding or fundraiser. This was the event. The one where all eyes were on Fancy Hotel. Where BDC's reputation was on the line. That's when I rallied the troops. Every technician. Not just at Fancy Hotel, but across the city, across Beta AV's regional footprint. We all lined up our exits. Not just I quit, but I quit together. And then, in the same week, we all handed in our 2-week notices. Imagine being Beta AV's director at fancy hotel. Already drowning. Already despised by clients. And suddenly, boom, your entire staff is gone. Not staggered. Not over months. Gone. I still remember the look on his face when he realized what was happening. He tried to call a meeting, tried to rally us, but no one cared. He wasn't a leader. He was a liability. And here's the kicker, our resignations weren't random. They were perfectly timed to leave just days before BDC's massive event. Suddenly, the flagship hotel's AV team went from 4 seasoned techs to one man. The arrogant, incompetent director who couldn't even manage a client meeting without me dragging him out of the room. He was about to run the biggest event of the year. Alone. Behind the scenes, BDC executives panicked. They called, they demanded, they threatened. Where are the techs? Where's the crew? But the answer was always the same, gone. And then came the moment that mattered most. Beta AV couldn't deliver. They were contractual obligated to provide AV services for BDC's biggest event at Fancy Hotel. But they had no staff. No manpower. No chance. That's called a breach of contract. And BDC knew exactly what that meant. Here's the poetic beauty of it. While Beta AV was scrambling, Alpha AV was waiting in the wings. Almost like they had insider information. Almost like someone had whispered that this exact disaster was coming. Alpha swooped in like heroes. They rolled in with gear, staff, and polish. And they didn't just cover the event, they over-delivered. They made BDC's flagship event sparkle in a way it hadn't in years. BDC executives, who had been fuming at Beta AV for months, suddenly had their faith restored. This is what we've been missing. And right there, the tide turned. The fallout was immediate. Beta AV's incompetence wasn't just embarrassing, it was public. A flagship event nearly collapsing? That's the kind of thing that doesn't stay quiet in a billion-dollar corporation. BDC had all the justification they needed. Beta AV had breached the contract. And when Alpha AV came forward with an offer absorbing Beta's equipment, personnel, and contracts, BDC happily signed on the dotted line. Overnight, Beta AV ceased to exist as an independent entity. All their locations, all their contracts, all their gear, swallowed up. And Fancy Hotel? Back under Alpha Avenue. Back to standards. Back to excellence. Oh, you'd think I'd feel triumphant. And in a way, I did. I remember sitting in the ballroom during Alpha's first event back. The lights gleamed. The screens were sharp. The sound was flawless. And I thought, I did this. I pulled the trigger that killed Beta Avenue. One man. One technician. One nobody who had been underestimated, dismissed, treated like baggage. And I had orchestrated the fall of a multi-million-dollar company. That's not revenge you read about in storybooks. That's real-life corporate warfare. And I had won. Here's the part most people don't tell you about revenge. Sometimes, even when you win, you lose. Beta AV's collapse didn't undo my personal losses. By the time it was over, my finances were wrecked. My car repossessed. My condo foreclosed. The video production company I'd poured my heart into, gone. I had to sell every piece of gear just to survive. Beta AV had taken everything from me long before I took everything from them. So no, I didn't walk away rich. I didn't walk away victorious in the Hollywood sense. But I walked away knowing this: they underestimated me. They disrespected me. And in the end, I was the one who wrote their obituary. And that was worth something. I'll never forget that week. The week Beta AV crumbled. Inside Fancy Hotel, the atmosphere shifted like a storm breaking. 4 months, maybe years, the air had been heavy with frustration, clients whispering complaints, staff rolling their eyes, executives muttering under their breath about those AV people. But when Alpha AV walked back through those doors, it was like oxygen returned. They didn't just fill the gap Beta left behind. They erased the rot. They brought in polished crews, top-tier gear, and most importantly, respect. BDC's annual event, the one that should have been a disaster. It was a masterpiece. Screens flickered to life with crystal clarity, lights transformed the ballroom into a dream, and sound filled the room without a single hitch. Executives clapped each other on the back. Planners breathed sighs of relief. And quietly, more than one of them said the same thing. This is how it's supposed to be. And while no one said it out loud, I knew they all felt it. Beta AV was dead. And I had been the one to dig the grave. As for Beta AV's director, the so-called captain of the sinking ship, he was nowhere to be seen. Oh, he tried to keep a brave face during those final weeks. Tried to bark orders, to claim control. But when his entire staff walked out, when the clients turned their backs, when Alpha AV marched back in like saviors, his power evaporated. He became what he always had been, a man in a suit who thought he knew better, standing in an empty office that no one respected. I never saw him again after the takeover. No farewell. No speech. Just, gone. And honestly, that was fitting. There's no dramatic showdown when arrogance collapses. Just silence. Just the absence of power. The story spread like wildfire. In the AV world, especially in hotels, reputation is everything. And when word got out that Beta AV had lost the flagship hotel because their staff mutinied, because they failed the biggest event of the year, every domino across the country started to fall. Alpha AV didn't just reclaim BDC. They reclaimed every hotel Beta AV had wormed its way into. Overnight, Beta's entire empire was gone. It was the kind of corporate revenge you don't often see, a full-scale collapse. Not because of lawsuits. Not because of sabotage. But because the people at the bottom finally said, enough. And I was the one who lit the match. Now, here's the part where I wish I could say I walked away into the sunset. That Alpha AV welcomed me back as a hero, showered me with bonuses, and restored my career. But life isn't a fairy tale. By the time Beta AV collapsed, the damage to my personal life was already done. 2 years of poverty wages had gutted me. My car was repossessed. My condo foreclosed. The production business I'd poured my heart and soul into, the dream I'd built since college, was dead. I had to sell every piece of equipment just to keep my head above water. Revenge had brought justice, yes. But it didn't refill my bank account. It didn't rewind time. It didn't undo the nights I spent staring at overdue bills, wondering how I'd make it to the next month. What it gave me instead was something quieter. Something harder to explain. It gave me validation. Because for years, Beta AV treated me like baggage. Like a remnant they were forced to accept. Like a technician they could control, silence, diminish. And in the end, I was the one who decided their fate. Here's what I've realized, looking back, revenge isn't always about winning. Sometimes, it's about balance. About tipping the scales back toward justice, even if it doesn't fix everything. Did Beta AV cost me everything? Yes. But did I let them get away with it? Hell no. They thought I was powerless. They thought I was trapped. They thought I was just another expendable worker. And yet, with a whisper here, a nudge there, and a perfectly timed exit, I took down their entire company. That's the power of underestimation. That's the danger of arrogance. And that's the satisfaction of revenge. So no, this story doesn't end with me rich and thriving. It doesn't end with Hollywood credits rolling. It ends with me scarred, but proud. Because when I look back on those years, on the endless hours, the disrespect, the frustration, I don't just see failure. I see the moment I decided, enough. I see the moment one man, written off as just a tech, orchestrated the downfall of a multi-million-dollar company. And maybe, just maybe, that's a better ending than wealth or applause. Because in the end, Beta AV no longer exists. And I do. Oh, what do you think? Was it worth it? If this story gave you chills, smash that like button and tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever witnessed? And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of karma, justice, and revenge that prove one thing: sometimes, the little guy really does win.